As a behavior specialist, I often hear people saying, but there has to be consequences. But here's the thing, consequences are only one way that people learn behavior, and often they're the least effective. So what else works? Today, I'll give you 6 other research-backed ways we can teach behavior that actually stick. If you are caring for someone else, whether paid or unpaid, and no matter how many hours you do it, did you realise that you may be missing out on thousands of pounds of discounts for things that you may use every day? The Able to Care podcast is proud to be sponsored by the UK's #1 carers card. Started by 2 best friends who recognise that carers deserve better and are 100% committed to helping to change the lives of all carers and bringing them together as a strong community. Carers Card UK provides support, recognition and rewards. It offers reassurance by providing an ID card that helps access emergency information when needed, while also unlocking discounts, a wellbeing hub, a carers circle tool and a community through their app. All of this for less than the price of a box of chocolates a year. There are discounts on gym membership, days out, electrical goods, clothing and even glasses. Let others know you care while taking a little care of yourself with an ID card you can be proud of. Visit carerscarduk.co.uk/promo code/able to care today to order yours. Hello, I'm Andy Baker and your host of the Able to Care podcast. And today we're challenging one of the most common assumptions in behavior management, that consequences are the main or even the best way that people learn. You hear it all the time in the media and things like that. You know, somebody does something wrong, name them and shame them. There should be consequences. They're getting away with it. So we hear it all the time that there should be consequences. But what if there also has to be relationships, modeling, coaching, and repair? So why is relying on consequences a little bit risky? Well, consequences are predominantly our ingrained mentality and culture around there should be consequences. Partly comes from we do have a slight innate sense of justice. That if somebody does something wrong, there should be a punishment. And if you think about it from an evolutionary point of view, if somebody in our tribe did something wrong, we might then expel them from our tribe. And that's kind of stuck with us, that it had an advantageous, a kind of survival advantage. Somebody who kept taking all the food and leaving everybody else to starve, probably being pushed out of the tribe meant that everybody else would survive. So there is benefits we have to explore when we're looking at that consequence-driven behavior. We also need to understand that behaviorism has dominated psychology for a long time. So Skinner's principle of operant conditioning, that punishment suppresses behavior, recognize it only temporarily, but it doesn't teach replacement skills. So if we've got somebody who's behaving in a certain way and we go, right, we're now punishing that, if they don't have any other way of trying to meet that need, they're going to carry on doing it. So it doesn't change the outcome. So if consequences are our only tool that we're using, we might suppress what they're doing, but it could lead to long-term poor well-being, poor mental health, or other maladaptive strategies. We often talk in my training courses around the punishment cycle, that when a negative behavior occurs and we in some way punish it or instigate consequences, sanctions, extinctions, whatever it is, we often end up reducing the person's quality of life, which doesn't improve their mood and self-esteem. In fact, it lowers it further. And lowering somebody's mood and somebody's self-esteem is probably not going to magically create positive behaviors as a result of that. In fact, it can lead to further negative behaviors. So even behaviorism recognized that consequences don't work in certain circumstances. It was overly simplified, but then people have taken the psychology and run with it in a kind of a pop approach. There's also neuroscience that shows that when somebody is dysregulated, when somebody is in a heightened state of arousal or they're upset or angry, then the limbic system part of their brain is in control. And the limbic system part of the brain, that fight or flight mechanism, communication and consequences and being able to weigh up possibilities is not processed properly. It's not processed as learning. It's either processed as a further threat or we shut down to it. If you ever tried to lecture a child and you can see their eyes just glaze over as you're talking to them. They're not processing the information. So what's the point? And yeah, you could shout at them, say, listen to me. Doesn't mean they'll start then focusing and changing their ways. It just means they'll become better at hiding that they're not listening, or that they're hiding and masking that they're dissociated. There's also also evidence, especially around, trauma-informed practice or understanding that we all have baggage, is that sometimes that harsh consequences can reinforce shame, automatic negative thoughts, and negative core beliefs about ourselves, and then trigger more avoidance, not reflection. That we can cause people to shame shield, and rather than the consequence, when we instigate the consequence, we can either kind of then go, hey, I've made a mistake and I can learn from that, or we shame it onto others. Well, it wasn't my fault, it's their fault. If they hadn't have done that. And again, I'm not learning anything. All I'm doing is feeling resentful about the consequence. I'm not looking to improve my outcomes and my behavior. So if we only punish, we don't teach what to do instead. Okay, so let's look at some of the alternative strategies that we have. Number one on my list is always modeling. People copy what they see. Whether it be the Bobo doll studies where children saw an adult attacking this inflatable clown and then mimicked their behavior. But when they didn't see them attack the inflatable clown, they didn't mimic the same behavior. So we replicate other people's behavior. Numerous social experiments. Some of you will have seen them on Facebook. The person, a buzzer goes off in a waiting room and everybody stands up. The person who has no idea why starts standing up with them. Or where everybody, the subject of an experiment, turns their back to the lift door because everybody else in the lift does the same thing. So we often copy those around us because we are social animals. So if we're modeling calm, we're modeling empathy, we're modeling kindness, we're modeling respect and honesty, well, people are more likely to mirror it around us. One of the principles in my target model is the behavior that we track, acknowledge, and then either reinforce and role model is what we're going to get. So if I'm noticing every time somebody is rude and I comment on the fact that they keep being rude, in fact, I'm quite rude when I'm telling them how they shouldn't be rude, well, that's what I'm going to get. Behavior that I track, acknowledge, and reinforce is what I'm going to get. So if I'm looking for empathy, for calm, for honesty, well, I need to start first. How dare I tell somebody else, calm down, if I can't be calm myself? Another way we can teach, though, as well as role modeling, is practice, rehearsal and practice. Some individuals don't learn well from cause and effect. They learn much better through repetition, through just practice. And think about something like, if you're learning maths, if the first time you tried 1 + 1 and you got it wrong, you were shouted at, you were screamed at, you'd feel a little bit, it would probably put you off maths for life. Instead, you were supported and coached and they kept working with you and kept practicing it. You don't learn maths by being told you're wrong, you practice. And behavior is exactly the same. So can we instigate some kind of role play, some rehearsals? Let's imagine, what could we do? Let's say we're feeling overwhelmed. What could we do instead? Let's run through it. Don't practice it when they're already in meltdown. Practice it when they're not. And social stories can give people a chance to try out positive behaviors in safe spaces. Because sometimes the reason that people choose what we class as a maladaptive or a negative behavior on the positive is because it's what's felt right or safest or the only thing that's worked for them in the past. So trying something new, change, may be difficult. So it's like that person who's going to be going on their first night out when they're quitting smoking. They might be going, what am I going to do with myself? How am I going to cope with this? And that can create anxiety, which makes them want to smoke. So if suddenly I use negative behaviors to cope with the world around me, and you then tell me, well, stop doing that, I might feel really nervous about trying out any new behaviors. So how can you help me to practice? How can you help me to develop some skills? We can also look at co-regulation as well. Regulation is taught through the nervous system's connection. So in polyvagal theory, it highlights how calm adults help others to calm. There's amazing examples, and I always refer to this like when I first started studying psychology. I remember an early study that showed that a lot of victims of crime, the first thing they'll do is call their mum or their partner before they call the police, because they want to feel safe before they can think rationally, before they can analyze what they should do. So having a safe person, a calm base, somebody that they trust around to help them to regulate. Let's take a breath together. I'll sit with you until we figure this out. means that I may be able to regulate more quickly, which means I might be able to reflect more correctly. Also, I'm learning. I'm learning how to calm. You're role modeling to me how to calm. Now, most of us, we learn that as we are babies. But some people don't learn in the same way. Some people haven't been exposed to the same stimulus. And therefore, we can't assume that, at this age, you should be able to calm. And also, we have to remember that some individuals are supporting are kind of losing some of those skills on the other end of their life. And therefore, they may need your help still to help them to regulate, just like a baby needs their mum to regulate. Another option that we've got is reflection and repair. So after incidences, we can create space for reflection. I just did a podcast recently on that repair process and going through some of the tools that we do. So do check that out if you haven't listened to that episode already. But we should always be afterwards. Sometimes the improvement, the changes are made in the repair process when things have calmed down, when we're able to kind of look at it and look at how our behavior has impacted on us and impacted on others. We do need to make sure that we help people to see and put it into their world. How does it impact on them from their point of view, what matters, rather than what you think should or shouldn't matter based on their view of the world. But what happened? What were they feeling? What could they have done differently? And this builds their emotional literacy, their better understanding of themselves, as well as better understanding of others. Next, number 5, we could use storytelling and metaphors. I use metaphors an awful lot when I'm teaching and when I'm obviously doing podcasts as well. We often use these as models to understand. They're ways of us connecting and us making sense of situations. So I've often liked the roller coaster analogy of working with children, like, that click, click, click bit you get at the beginning of the roller coaster. Well, imagine everything that happens, like every button that's pushed. Well, that's another click on the roller coaster. When you're at the top of the roller coaster, you're on the ride. When you're at the bottom, you can get off. And when you were at the top of the ride the other day, it resulted in X, Y, and Z. Whereas, did you notice when you were first getting on the ride? Could we have done something different? So we can use these stories, analogies, even my own mistakes, my disclosures to help other people make sense of their own behavior and sometimes that of others as well. Now, when we are looking at consequences, sometimes it is appropriate for consequences. And there's only 2 types of consequences I tend to advocate for. One is natural consequences, and one is either referred to as balance or logical consequences. Now, natural consequences are ones that are not imposed. They basically involve the inaction of caregivers around. So if I break the TV, I can't watch the TV anymore. That's a natural consequence. If I shout, people might walk away from me because they find me scary. That's a natural consequence. And sometimes natural consequences are a fairer way of teaching. It involves the inaction of people. And sometimes they think, I didn't like that, and therefore I am more effectively going to learn from it. There's no shaming from other people. It's a case of, hey, these things happen. That happened, and then as a result of that, this is what happened as a result. Helping them connect the dots and sort of seeing how their behavior does have natural consequences. We can also potentially use logical consequences and stuff, but you need to be careful. I might do another podcast on that, talking about, short, immediate, and relevant, and then forgotten, so the SURF acronym when I'm looking at those. So now I know many of you out there listening, sometimes it's really hard. And when I'm teaching around behavior management, so often, but this kid did this. What should the consequence be? Or what about when they do this? Shouldn't there be consequences for that? And it doesn't matter what age bracket you've got people being supported, whether it be children, adults in care, elderly, relatives being cared for or looked after. There's often this view that there should be consequences. Without consequences, there is no learning and there's no accountability. But I want you to imagine that at work, you made the mistake. You first started at work and you made a mistake. Would you want to be punished? Should there be consequences? Or should there be somebody sitting down with you going, hey, it's okay. Let's look through, see where things went wrong, see what we could do differently and how we can improve. And that should keep happening. The big thing is, okay, a workplace can dictate how long that should take because they don't have an infinite amount of time and money. But when we're working with individuals, who are we to dictate how long it should take them to learn? If they're still struggling with certain elements of the process, certain elements of, let's say, they do become emotionally dysregulated, it may take them a while to learn how their emotional system works if they're ever able to. So who are we to dictate that they should have learned it by now? So accountability doesn't mean punishment. Reflection, repair, and sometimes natural consequences, build responsibility far more effectively. I know some people feel that what I'm saying is all a bit too fluffy, a bit too soft. It's not soft, it's strategic. It works better. It's shifting from fear-based learning to skill-based teaching. And if we're the role models, if we're the ones letting others know how they should behave to other people, and we're instigating consequences or punishments or telling off or walk away, take away, whatever it is, when they're the ones in power, they're going to be using the same thing. Wouldn't we prefer it if we're role modeling empathy, compassion, boundaries? And yes, sometimes there is consequences, but it's done through an empathic and kind of, hey, these are just what happens, not a kind of enforced authority on other individuals. Now, the other objection you sometimes get is there isn't time for all this. It is a quick and easy solution of that warning of, right, if you don't do this, I'm going to do this. Because you've done this, I'm going to do this. Right, that's it. No more Xbox for the rest of the week. Doesn't mean it's right. Sometimes investing time up front in reflection, in responding rather than reacting to behavior, actually reduces the likelihood of incidents repeating in the future, which means we're saving time in the long run. So this week, I want you to try replacing a consequence with one of those 6 tools, or thinking about where you could utilize those tools rather than consequences in what you do. Notice how the learning feels different, how the relationship maybe feels stronger. And I want you to think of the last time that you imposed a consequence on others. Was there an alternative teaching tool that you could have used instead? Thanks for listening. We are the Able to Care podcast. And if this episode shifted how you think about behavior, please share it with your team, somebody you know, teachers, parents, caregivers, whoever, paid and unpaid, because the best behavior teaching isn't about control, it's about connection. See you next time.